Hey Wolfpack, and welcome back. I hope you all had a great week. Today, we're reading 3 more Nightshift Stories. With that said, whether you're sitting around a campfire, on the night shift, or even laying in bed, let my voice soothe your nightmares. I guess you can say I'm somewhat of a failure. At least, a failure in the 21st century millennial's mind. That is, I never went to college, only have a high school diploma, and am pregnant now at the age of 20. I'm not really ashamed to say that the pregnancy was from stupid planning, and I'm sure it will be fine. When me and my boyfriend decided to have unprotected sex in the back of his pickup truck before a movie, but there's really nothing I can do now, as an abortion is out of the question. I'm actually kind of looking forward to it, being a parent, I mean. During my senior year of high school is when I started picking up shifts at the quick stops on the weekends. Our town is small, so the store is only open until 2 a.m., rather than 24/7. But it was only after I graduated that they brought me on full-time. Realizing I probably wouldn't have many other options, as I was well below the poverty line, and my drunk parents wouldn't bother helping out with anything financially to further my education, I decided to accept. It wasn't long before they decided to promote me to a manager, as I was the only reliable employee. It wasn't really that hard. The mopping, having to ID people who bought cigs or alcohol, and kicking the occasional drunk bastard out. Before I get into telling you about what happened, let me preface by saying that I don't scare very easily. In the 2 years I've worked here, I've been robbed at gunpoint twice and hardly batted an eye. "Pull the trigger," I said to one of them at the mere age of 18. The man, bright and jittery, high on some substances I couldn't afford, gave me a sideways look, like maybe what I had just said was part of his hallucination. But in the end, he walked out with a couple of candy bars and a pack of beer. But last night, I closed by myself for the first time, and something odd happened. It started when I sent my last worker home, Carly. She reminded me a lot of me when I was in high school, and it saddened me. So, I never kept around till the wee hours of the night. When she left, we had the occasional customer, but nothing substantial. And at about 1 a.m., we were dead. The door chimed, and I looked to see Finch, my boyfriend, walk in. His shirt was dirty, and his jeans looked like they had seen better days. He often helped out on his family's farm, and he came over around the counter and gave me a kiss, rubbing my stomach and remarking, "How are my 2 girls?" I laughed. "I'm about to start closing up, so I'll meet you back at home in..." He stopped my words with another kiss, and I could feel the length of his member through his pants as he pressed against me. I know he wanted to go to the bathroom, be dirty and have a quick moment, but that was not happening, especially when I had just gotten promoted. I pushed him away. "When we get home, okay?" He looked slightly hurt, but he knew I was trying to turn over a new leaf, trying to be a new me and make the right decisions. And with that, he nodded. "You called me," and left. I let out a breath as he closed the door behind him, and taste of him still on my lips and slightly confused at what he had said. The only reason I even bothered to tell you about all that nonsense was because things started getting weird the moment he left. A man came in, blue beanie, red sneakers. I looked out at the pump and saw he hadn't pumped any gas or even came in a car, so I was on alert. But everything went smoothly. He bought a Snickers with exact change and left. It was now 1:30 a.m., and I was about to start stock on our beer when I heard the door beep and saw the man walk in again. Thinking he forgot something, I went on to my business of counting the alcohol we had sold for the day until I saw him back up at the counter, his blue beanie highlighting the deep blue in his eyes. He was pale like the moon, and his gaze never shifted from mine as I walked and saw that he had exactly what he purchased before on the counter, a Snickers bar. "You want one for your girlfriend too?" I said, completely out of any good jokes for the night. The man laughed. "Nah, one will do." I thought his comment was odd, considering he had just bought one a few minutes ago, but I didn't say anything as I scanned the item. He handed over exact change and left. But I hadn't even closed the cash drawer when I heard the door open again, and that same man walked in, went to the candy aisle, and brought a Snickers bar to the counter. His dopey eyes just looked up at me, smiling. I said nothing. After a moment of us standing there, the man shifted on his feet, rubbing the little bit of his stubble that had started to grow on his face. That'll be it. Are you trying to screw with me?" The words left my mouth before I could really consider that I was talking to a customer. The man merely looked at me, turned behind him like I might have been talking to someone else, and then turned back to me. No?" he said. I shook my head, letting out a long breath and closing the drawer. Sorry, I said, scanning the bar, getting the exact change I was expecting, and watching the man walk out the door again. That time, I waited to see if I was actually crazy, waited to see if the man would walk in for a fourth time. After a few minutes of silence, I decided to blame it on the baby hormones. But there was just something inside of me that wanted a more solid answer than that. I hadn't sold a Snickers bar all night, so if this man was screwing with me, there would be 3 missing from the shelf. I walked over, clipboard in hand, from the last shift's count of stock. According to the second shift, we should have had 7. So, if he had come in 3 times and bought 3 bars, then there should be... Clipboard fell from my hands as I approached the display. 6. There were only 6. I shook my head, running my fingers through my hair and picking up my phone to take a picture, like that would have been some sort of mediocre proof that I wasn't going insane. Then I dialed Finch. "Babe?" He answered. "Hey, is everything alright?" he asked. Yeah, could you maybe come over while I close down?" I could hear him huff a breath of worry. "Do I need to call the police or..." No, I said, laughing, still standing in the middle of the store. "I'm just being paranoid is all. I'd just feel a lot better if you were here. Already on my way," he said before hanging up. I picked up my clipboard and walked over to the counter, pulling out my phone so I could write this for all of you. So I know I'm not crazy, and I don't forget a single thing when he comes. The door chimed, and I looked to see Finch, my boyfriend, walk in. His shirt was dirty, and jeans looked like they had seen better days. He often helped out on his family's farm, and he came over around the counter and gave me a kiss, rubbing my stomach and remarking, "How are my 2 girls?" I laughed. "I'm about to start closing up, so I'll meet you back at home in..." He stopped my words with another kiss. In the summer between my senior year of high school and the start of college, I got a job working the evening shift at my town's local crab shack, from 2:30 until 9. You know the place, even if you've never been there. If you've ever gone on vacation to Maine or Cape Cod, or really anywhere in coastal New England, you've seen at least a dozen places like it. Ramshackle eateries along the boardwalk decorated with oars and lobster traps, hand-painted signs advertising standard fare, lobster rolls, clam strips, hamburgers, onion rings, fries. I'd eaten there once or twice growing up, but it was more for the tourists than the locals. For the most part, it was a pretty normal place, but there were 2 weird things about it. The first was the cook. Ramondo was completely blind. I know that sounds crazy, and I didn't believe it at first either, but the longer I worked there, the more I began to see how it was possible. The kitchen wasn't a big place, and Ramondo, a withered and leathery man with a permanent grimace and a permanent slump to his posture, knew by rote its every in and out. From what I could see through the little window behind the register, he kept his kitchen utensils clearly organized using a system of hooks hanging from a corkboard, and with a menu as limited as ours. He could very easily just fall into a comfortable routine, no sight required. There was a rumor he was mute too, but I heard him speak once. The second weird thing about the crab shack was that it was open 24 hours a day. It may not sound that weird, but for one thing, even during the busy season, late June through early September, nothing out here stays open all night long, and I mean nothing. We're a tourist town, yeah, but we're not one of the big ones, just a bump on the map halfway between Gloucester and Innsmouth. Nothing here is open past midnight, let alone all night long. I only knew one of the night shift guys, Chuck Landingham, a smallish, preppy-looking kid I'd gone to high school with. Not a friend exactly, just someone you recognize when you see him in the hallway. Back in May, when I first started, he used to come in a little early and we'd chat a bit while I rang out my register and washed up for the night. As the summer passed though, working the night shift took a toll on Chuck. I wasn't surprised. Switching to a completely nocturnal schedule must have been pretty rough for anyone. Dark circles appeared and then grew long beneath his eyes, which themselves took on a faraway look that I can't quite describe, except to say that even when he met my gaze, he didn't seem to see me. Instead, insisted to look through me at some invisible mystery on the other side of my head. He became distant, quiet, withdrawn, and by the end of July, we'd stopped chatting altogether. One night, as I was leaving, he stopped me, grabbing me by my wrist and holding me back. He looked at me expectantly and opened his mouth as if to speak, but let go without saying anything and turned away. I was halfway at the door when I heard him muttering to himself, "I can't do this anymore," he whispered in a dull, defeated tone, and then a little louder, "I can't do this anymore. I can't." He quit not long after that, but that was the last time I saw him. I don't know where he is now. After he left, I got a frantic call from my boss, the owner of the restaurant, asking if I could pick up Chuck's last few night shifts. After seeing the toll it had taken on him, I wasn't inclined to agree, especially because the summer was winding down, and college would start in just a couple of weeks for me. I was already considering giving my notice early and taking a little time to relax. The last thing I wanted was to completely retool my sleep schedule right before I started my academic career. I can't say what it was exactly that changed my mind. No, that's a lie. He offered me time and a half of the night shift rate, plus he'd still pay me for my regular shifts, even though I wouldn't be working them. He begged with me, pleaded with me to pick up the shifts, and I remember being a bit put off by his dramatics. There was an actual fear in his voice, like he was scared the crab shack might have to simply close for a night or two, or 3, actually. There were 3 of them, 3 overnight shifts I agreed to cover. Just 3 shifts and I'd be making more money in just that time than I had the whole previous month. I don't have a lot to say about my first night shift at the crab shack. The most noteworthy thing I can mention is this: nobody came in. Nobody at all. I rolled in that night at 9 p.m. The same time I'd normally be leaving, and I took over for Jackie, another one of the cashiers whom I didn't know very well. After she left, I was a little surprised to glance through the window that led into the kitchen and see Ramondo was still there, apparently working the night shift as well. Didn't that guy ever go home? The more I thought about it, the more I began to realize how unlikely it was for the past 3 months it had always been Ramondo at the grill. Didn't the crab shack have any other cooks? "Hey man," I got called into the kitchen, sometime after 2 a.m. "Is it always this dead on the overnight?" No answer. I drove home the next morning, as exhausted as I'd ever been. Never mind that no customers had ever materialized. Sometimes work is less exhausting than boredom. At least, if I'd kept busy there, I'd have something to occupy my mind. When I got home, I crawled into bed and slept all morning, into the afternoon, straight through the day and into the evening. I had even less to say about my second night shift. This time, I didn't bother to try and engage the cook in conversation, but other than that, the night was exactly the same. I was exhausted from the beginning, so the hours felt even longer this time, felt even more boring and somehow even emptier. The next morning as I climbed into bed, I remember thinking, now I understand why this shift burned Chuck out the way it had. But I was wrong. On the 3rd night, we had a customer. "Here he comes." The blind cook spoke in a deep voice. much deeper than his slight and elderly frame would suggest. He spoke up out of nowhere, and it took me by surprise, as much because I'd never heard him speak before, as because I had no idea what he meant. When I glanced up from my phone, I saw that the dining room was still empty, the windows against the far wall still displaying nothing but the thick blanket of night, marred only by what little stretch of pavement the anemic streetlights could reach. Who? I started to ask. But before I got any further, the front door opened, and in walked my first and only customer during my 3 nights on the night shift at the Crab Shack. He was a tall man, tall and broad, filling the doorway before moving forward with a liquid grace surprising for someone of his size, letting the door slam behind him. He wore a suit with a matching short-brimmed Panama hat, both crisp and clean, and of a color I'd never seen before. What I cannot describe is his face. It's not that I've forgotten. No, every detail of that night is unfortunately burned into my memory for as long as I'll live. The reason I cannot describe his face is that I found I could not look at it. Every time I tried, my eyes would simply glide right past it or around it, and I would find myself staring at something just past his shoulder or over his head, or down at the knot in his tie, or up at the cloth band around his hat. "Welcome to the Crab Shack," I greeted him in a dry whisper, the only voice I found I could muster. "Can I take your order?" He nodded slightly. Even without seeing his face, that nod conveyed the presence of a smile, and then he ordered. I cannot recount his order here. I would not know how to begin, nor would I dare repeat it if I could. He ordered in a language I had never heard before, barely even registered as a language, guttural and elegant and moist. His order contained noises I had never heard before in a human voice, terrible words with uncharted vowels, a language which it is my dearest hope I will never have the misfortune of ever hearing again. Worse yet, I found myself nodding, as I would to any other customer, as if he had ordered a simple lobster roll or hamburger or plate of clam strips. With my eyes still on the knot of his tie, I punched a few buttons on the register. I never saw what they were. My hands moved as if on their own accord. I don't know what his total came to, and I don't know what he gave me, but it was not money. I placed it in the register, though later, when I looked again, it wasn't there. I turned and made my way over to the little window in the kitchen. "Hey, Ramondo," I called in. "This guy wants a..." And then, impossibly, horribly, I found myself repeating the order back to the chef, word for word, noise for noise. It all came right back. But, as terrible as the sound of those words was, the feel of them coming out of me was even worse. Like an angry school of slippery eels thrashing and fighting as they crawled up my throat, birthed into the night by my unwilling vocal cords. "You got it," Ramondo answered balefully, and then he began to cook. As I've said, I could not see far into the kitchen, and definitely not far enough to see just what it was that Ramondo placed in the deep fryer that night. I could see him holding something with both hands, something heavy by the way he struggled, and yet no bigger than a small meatloaf. The sound it made when it hit the hot oil surpassed the familiar sizzle of any seafood I've ever heard fried before. Not just louder, but higher in pitch and almost emotive. Almost like a scream. The smell it made I will not try to describe, except to say that even now, there are still nights when I awake in a sweat from dreams that consist of nothing more than that smell. "Order up!" I broke myself out of my reverie, and saw that Ramondo had slid towards me a plate, a horrible plate, holding a fried nightmare from which I should have looked away, right away, immediately away, but I couldn't. But I wish I had. Instead, I will have to live the rest of my life remembering that dish, remembering that order, that sick and twisted and horrible order, the circular burst of tentacles, all deep fried, and no two the same length, none originating from a common point, each sticking off in its own direction. One of them, not a tentacle at all, but a finger, curled up as if making a come-hither gesture, a long and gnarled fingernail peeking out through the breading, a jagged row of flat white teeth, just half a jaw, A quarter smile no more than a slight curve ending in its single incisor. And the claws too. Of course, the claws. The claws with no arm attached, but which emerged from that dead lump of fish like mushrooms growing in a cluster on a cadaver's cheek. Finally, the most horrible. Near the center of the mass bulged what I thought at first resembled a blister, but which I quickly realized was not but an eye. A single hazel eye, dead but staring with a preserved sadness. But did I see it blink? Did I see it blink? Did I see it turn, ever so slightly, to meet mine directly and to stare in a silent and unheeded plea of clemency? Did it look at me? Did it blink? Impossible, I tell myself. It couldn't have. I just imagined it. The man, or whatever it was, but a man it was not, took the tray from me. I think he might have nodded his thanks, but I can't be sure. He carried his meal over to one of the booths and sat with his back to me. All I could see were his shoulders. When he ate, he barely moved. His arms never left his side. After he left, I worked up my nerve and then turned once more to the little window in the kitchen. "What?" I started to ask before erupting into a sudden coughing fit, my throat suddenly thick with mucus. What the hell was that? I could barely see Raimondo, just the right side of his face, just enough to notice when he smiled. The first time I'd seen any expression beyond indifference across the leathery countenance. There was no mirth within it, though it almost seemed cruel, even sadistic. All he said was, "Don't you have to go bus his tray?" I quit the next day, and I haven't been back since. A week later, I left for college, and as soon as I could, I transferred somewhere else, somewhere further inland. I never visited home, and I still haven't, not in all the years since. I don't think I ever will. I'm more comfortable out here anyways, where the only seafood restaurants are the occasional Red Lobster, far from the ocean, where live such creatures as the one I once served. But it's not the creature itself that haunts me the most. When I recalled that summer before my freshman year of college, though haunt me it does, I often dream of what it might have been before it met Raimondo's deep fryer. Nor is it the identity of the man, whose face would accept not even the slightest glance, nor the nature of his relationship with my boss, the owner of the crab shack, that had left the latter in such obvious mortal terror at the thought of the restaurant closing for even a single night shift. No, the question that dominates my mind and forces me into fixation until I tear my thoughts away back to matter more benign is and always will be, did I see it blink? My name is Tom. I've worked at McDonald's for a pretty long time. It was the only normal option that I had in our tiny little town. Well, at least it was normal, until that one night shift. That night, I was set to the make-drive stance. My manager likes to stick me there, though I find it pretty comforting. The job is basically to sit on a chair next to the intercom, get the order from the customers outside, make it, and serve it to the customers through the reception window. It's much better than working at the counter with all those extra ketchup and mayonnaise requests, and much, much better than cleaning the whole store. So, I don't have complaints. The time was 11 p.m. Soon, my shift would be over. I was leaning on the windowsill, playing on my phone. Our branch is at a pretty isolated place outside from town, so we don't have that many people coming by, especially at these hours. Suddenly, the intercom bell rang. That means that someone is outside with his car and wants to order. I open my microphone and say, "This is McDonald's, Tom speaking, what would you like to order?" From the other side, I could hear the voice of a tired, middle-aged man. "Hey, yeah, can you give me one large fry and one large Coke?" "No problem, sir, it'll be $12. And your name is?" "Bob," he says. "Okay, Bob, please move forward with your car to the reception window and wait." The one is an easy cake. I'm rushing to the kitchen, grabbing fries that were ready in advance and pouring into a large cup Coca-Cola juice from the machine. As I step towards the window, I see a police car, and in the driver's seat, there is a fat cop who was waiting for his healthy midnight meal. He looks exhausted. "Tough night?" I ask him to break the ice. He sighs. "Yeah, just getting back from a harsh scene. Terrible car accident. Oh God, are there any fatalities? As he responded, he takes his fat finger and slides it through his neck. I got the meaning. He pays me. I hand him his fatty bag and he drives away. You know, one of the interesting things about working at McDrive is that I get to hear a bunch of different stories from a variety of people. One time, it's a cop. Another time, it's a lawyer. And once in a while, it's a drunk homeless guy who thinks that the window is the main cash register and yells at us when we try to explain to him that this cashier is for cars only. The branch has returned to be empty and quiet. I was playing on my phone again, waiting for the shift to be over. After a few minutes, the intercom rang again. McDonald's, Tom speaking, what would you like to order? But there's no response from the other side of the line, just a wired white noise. It's odd. Hello? How can I help you? But the white noise is still there. No response. It's so weird, I tell myself. Maybe the microphone has just stopped working. But a moment before I get out from the store to check it up, I hear a low voice from the intercom. Hello? A man's voice says from the other side of the line. Hey, good evening, I respond. My family and I would like to order, please. Okay, what would you like? After a few moments of silence, the man says, me and my wife will have a double Big Mac meal with fries and a Coke, and 2 Happy Meals for the little 2 out back. I'm writing down the order and tell them the price. What's the name? Just write the Goldberg family, he says. Okay, please move forward with your car to the reception window and wait for the order to be ready. Back to the kitchen, I turn on the oil heater and pour it on some frozen fries and fry frozen processed meat. When everything is ready, I put it all in a large carton bag and stepped towards the window. When I got there, I took my head outside the window and saw an old car moving towards me slowly. The model is a white Honda Civic. It looks like they didn't even bother to take it to a garage or something. But who am I to judge other people? I work at the most doubtful place that exists. The car stops near the window, and the father opens down the car's window. Hey, Goldbergs are here. He smiles. Hey, I'm Tom. He keeps staring at me with his smile without saying a word. I can hear the crickets from the embarrassing silence. Okay, it's $40, please, I say to break the silence. Right, he says and opens his wallet, searching for money. As he continues to search his money, one of the 2 kids suddenly yells, Dad, I'm hungry! And then his younger sister yells too, Yes, Daddy, bring the food! Their mother quickly turns her head to them and says, Here, in a moment you'll have your food. The dad looks at me with a shameful look and apologizes. Sorry for this, we are just starving to death, and we had one hell of a ride. All good, I smile to him. While he continues to look for his lost money in his wallet, I leave their order on the inside window until they pay. Suddenly, I'm starting to smell this awful smell of something burned, like something is burning really strong. I turn to the family. I'm sorry, I've got to check something. Before they reply, I'm already running to the kitchen, ready to see the danger I did. God, I probably forgot to turn off the oil heater. But as I got there, the smell was no longer there. Nothing had been burned down, and the kitchen looks normal as always. This is so weird. After a moment, I remember that I have to get back to the reception window to complete the payment and deliver their family their order. But as I return to the window, the Goldbergs were no longer there. Their bag is still on the floor, and they didn't leave the cash for it. I stuck my head outside from the window, and there was no sign for them or their rusty old car. A few moments after my shift was over, as I was driving home, I thought to myself, why the hell they left without taking their meals if they were starving? And also, where was this weird smell coming from? In the morning after I arrived at my morning shift, again in the McDrive stance, as I step inside the branch's main entrance, I see all the staff and my manager gathering around the small TV. It was a news broadcast. It's rare that something happens in our little sleepy town, so it must be something serious that occurred. The broadcast begins. The anchor's face is serious, and with a dramatic pose she says, A tragic car accident has taken the life of a whole family. Oh God, I'm thinking to myself. It must be the accident that the policeman talked about. But then, a video footage of the event is being played on the screen. In the video, there are a lot of emergency forces surrounding a vehicle that is on fire, And the vehicle is a white Honda Civic with lots of tin blows on it, just like the Goldbergs. As I'm trying to figure out what the hell is going on, the anchor continues. The Goldberg family were on their way from a long road trip, and all they wanted was to stop by at the close McDonald's branch just around the corner. But a few moments before, their car suddenly deteriorated to the side of the road, and the result was fatal. The vehicle crashed into an electrical pole that was at the corner. Because of their high speed, the pole collapsed on the car and blew up. The car caught fire, leaving the father, mother, and their 2 children burned to death. The report ended. I stared at the TV screen. Still can't believe what I had just heard, mumbling to myself, "What the hell? They died? It can't be true. I saw them alive yesterday. They did make it to the branch. I took their order for them, and, Suddenly, before I can finish my mind, the intercom bell rang. It took me a few seconds to realize, and it rings again. "Tom!" My manager yells at me. "What are you waiting for? There are customers outside. Answer them!" With my hands shaking and my heart beating fast as hell, I open up the microphone and say, "McDonald's, Tom speaking. What would you like to order?" But then, I hear this voice again. It's the dad. "We didn't take our meals last night. Can you bring us food? We are so hungry." Thanks for listening, Wolfpack. If you want to submit your own story, the links for my email and subreddit will be down below. I've also created a Discord, so if you want to join that, the link will be in the description down below as well. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And with that said, have beautiful nightmares, and I will see you next time.